I'm Michael Bungay-Stanier. This is Change Signal. This is the podcast where we cut through the blather, the BS and the noise to find the good stuff that works in change and transformation. All right, here's the start of a joke. A CEO, a consultant, and a counsellor walk into a bar. I'll come back to the joke, I promise. But I do want to say today's episode's a new format, and you're going to hear a nugget of wisdom from 3 different people. And no surprises here. It's a CEO, it's a consultant, and it's a counsellor. And what links them all, other than the letter C, is that sometimes the path to transformation runs directly through what feels like the valley of failure. Garry Ridge built WD-40, that's the lubricant company, into a global phenomenon by doing something that sounds like career suicide, actively encouraging his people to share their mistakes. Cron watched a wildly successful private equity executive hit rock bottom and then say 5 words that changed everything. I'm out of ammo. And Mark Smith faced a massive complex change initiative spiraling towards chaos and made the counterintuitive choice to give up control entirely. Now, if change has ever felt like a struggle, and I'm saying that because I know it has, you're going to find something powerful here. And by the way, you'll hear the rest of that joke at the end of the episode. Let's start with Garry Ridge.
I'm the consciously incompetent, probably wrong and roughly right, past chairman and CEO of WD-40 Company, but today I'm also the dean of dumbassery.
All right, that's Garry being typically modest, because under his guidance and over 25 years, WD-40 7x'd their revenue. They became an international phenomenon, so just not in the United States, but global. And really, this is probably what's truly amazing. 98% of the people said they love to work at the company. Now, that's the context, that's the setup. Now let's get into the conversation. There's something, I mean, that's an extraordinary story. It's not only extraordinary to grow the revenue, and it's not only extraordinary to actually figure out distribution, so you're in almost every country in the world. It's really extraordinary to create a shared culture where 98% of the people say they love to work here and 93% of the people would recommend it to somebody to come and work there. And it's not like it's a glamorous product. As you say, it's oil in a can. You know, that feels pretty commodity to me, but you've created some magic around it. If you had to pick one change initiative that is delightful for you, one that you rolled out, which one would you pick?
Doing what we did to remove fear. And, one of the most disabling emotions we have in life is fear.
Yeah.
So we said, we're going to take the word mistake out of our vocabulary, and we're now going to turn that into what we called a learning moment.
Right.
And a learning moment is a positive or negative outcome of any situation that needs to be openly and freely shared to benefit all people.
Yeah.
Now, this is a really interesting change initiative that I'll share with you because there's some learning here. So I went out, and this is, I'm probably 3 or 4 years in my role as CEO, and I go and said, look, I want to hear not only what works, I want to hear what doesn't work in the organization, and you can be assured that, if you share that with me, everything's going to be okay. Right. And I could probably hear the echo of, oh, sure.
Yeah, exactly. I'm trying not to roll my eyes even as you speak, and I know that you pulled this off. So right. How did you get over that skepticism? Because that just sounds like a career-limiting move. The CEO
Absolutely.
going, what is that famous movie director? He said something along the lines of, I don't want yes men around me, even if it costs them their job. Something like that.
Exactly, Michael. And I said, so let's start sharing that, and as you said, oh yeah, sure. And I thought, well, one of the things I've learned in my journey when I did my master's degree, when looking at the change model, what we tend to do is jump into implementation of change.
Right.
But there's 2 steps before that that are vital. Information concerns and personal concerns. Right. So you announce a change, and the first thing that comes into someone's mind is personal concerns. How is that going to hurt me?
Yeah.
What do you mean? And then information concerns are, what aren't you telling me? What don't I know?
Right.
So I wasn't getting a really fast response to my suggestion that we were going to take the word fear failure out and have people change. So I thought, well, what we need to do here is we need to coax people into this.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to have a contest. We're going to run it for a year. And I want you to email me or send me your learning moments, and we'll have monthly winners, and then we'll have a grand prize. The grand prize winner out of a draw from those that have entered every month will win a first-class trip around the world with their husband, wife, or significant other to visit our offices. Great prize.
Yeah.
So I went out. The first month, I got 4 entrants.
Brave people, those brave people.
So what did I do with those 4 people, Michael? I made heroes out of them.
Yeah.
I praised them. I lifted them up. They were my employees or trade tribe members of the month. They couldn't do a thing wrong in my eyes.
Yeah.
Next month, I got 8. What did I do with them? And then
again.
by the 4th
Yeah.
or the 5th month, I'm getting hundreds.
Yeah.
So, I think when we think about personal concerns and information concerns, we have to be authentic about proving to people that our intent is true.
Can I ask you about this? Because you said, before you start implementing the change, you need to do this informational and personal concerns. But it sounds like by inviting people to do this competition, that actually is the change. Or is that a kind of plowing the field for kind of codifying this as a part of the culture?
Yeah, well, I think what I determined was their personal concern was, I don't believe that by doing this, I'm going to be safe.
Right.
So what we had to do was, through behavior, show them that they were going to be safe.
Yeah.
So that was the reason I put into place this ongoing, promotional effort, if you will, to do that.
All right, Garry started off our triple header by laying down the gauntlet. And here's how I put it. What needs to be true to remove the fear that's inevitably entangled around change? His solution may not be, probably isn't going to be your solution. But that question, that acknowledgement of the fear, that insight that removing the fear sets things free, that is so powerful. For more on Garry and his new book, Any Dumbass Can Do It, you'll find the right website to go to is learningmoment.net. So learningmoment.net. All right, that's the CEO done. Let's get on to the counselor.
This book was born of my own journey of recovery from alcoholism and drug addiction. So I do know what it's like to be held captive to forces that govern your life from the shadows, right? I know what it's like to be someone who looked for external solutions to internal problems and then found that my solutions became bigger problems than the problems they were trying to solve.
That's Ian Cron. Now, he is best known in the world of the Enneagram. That's a personal profiling tool. But the book he's referencing is called The Fix, How the 12 Steps Offer a Surprising Path of Transformation for the Well-Adjusted, the Down and Out, and everyone in between, which, let's face it, is a terrific subtitle. Now, I've been long fascinated with the 12-step method. It is hands down one of the most successful methods for not just changing behavior, but sustaining that change at an individual level. I know this isn't quote unquote the classic change management stuff, but I think it's very powerful adjacent wisdom. I'm lucky enough not to have yet been directly confronted by the world of addiction, and it means that I've got a lot to learn from Ian. So here's our conversation.
The first step in the 12 steps is, we admitted we were powerless over blank. Fill in your fix of choice there, right? That our lives had become unmanageable. And I'm always like with leaders, I'm like, so much of good leadership is knowing your limitations, admitting what you're powerless over, right? And what you have control over and what you don't. And most leaders think they have more control over people, places, and things than they actually do.
Exactly. So this is an interesting connection for me, Ian, because admitting my powerlessness is not a strong call to action for me. I don't even know what that means, and I don't like it. But understanding how little I control feels something that I can understand. What have you learned about what it takes for people to embrace that first step?
Yeah. So usually it's pain. Pain has a funny way of reducing us to a moment. I had this beautiful moment with a guy. He was a private equity guy, and he's insanely successful at what he does. And we were working on a problem, and he looked at me at one point. He goes, "I'm out of ammo." And I remember thinking, "What did you just say?" Now, this is a guy, if I gave you his pedigree, you would be,
Right.
This is the last person in the world you'd think would ever be out of ammo, right? And he's like, "I'm out of ammo." And I literally sat there for a moment. I went, "Good, well, now we can start." This idea that powerlessness is actually a kind of superpower. Because when you get out of, when you're trying to assert so much control and make things happen, you're actually preventing things from happening, right? On their own, organically, things that will percolate to the surface, right? But you're too much in the way. Now, in an organizational setting, what does that look like, right? Well, one is I'm going to acknowledge reality. Step one, acknowledge reality.
Brilliant.
Right? All right. So I have to recognize the current state of my organization, my affairs, my challenges, my limitations. I'm going to face up to my denial. Right? So denial, I like to say, is the refusal to know what you know.
That's a lovely phrase.
You know it in the margins of awareness.
And I love that. Yeah.
Right? In the margins of awareness, I know we're heading toward chapter 13. Okay? In the margins of awareness, but I do not want to deal with that reality.
Yeah.
Right? So step two in the 12 steps is come to believe that a power greater than myself can restore us to sanity. And another way of maybe using the word sanity is like sanus in Latin, wholeness, health, right? So what does that look like, right? It's just about cultivating humility. Like, okay, I as the leader actually don't have all the answers, but maybe if I look to the group as a higher power, my team is actually in the aggregate is a power greater than me.
Right, we trumps me.
And then you get to a step 3, right, which is turn our will and our lives over to the care of God or the group, right, as we understand Him, right?
Right.
And that is really about surrendering to a plan, man.
Yeah.
It's about change requires a commitment to a clear and actionable plan supported by trust in the process.
I love how provocative this is for us as leaders and agents of change. Admit our powerlessness. I mean, honestly, in some ways that feels to me like giving into just reality, the reality of the situation, rather than maintaining a fantasy that we're somehow in control. And then the framing of a higher power. Now look, I'm an atheist, so that's not going to be God for me, but the higher power of the team or the community or the emergent system. I mean, I know this sounds a touch woo-woo, but it does feel like, in a way, being in deeper relationship with the emergent nature of change. For more on Ian and his work, both the new book, The Fix, and his work in the Enneagram, the website is ianmorgancron.com. So all one word, ianmorgancron.com. So I asked my friend Kate who I should invite on the show. Now, Kate's a future guest. We've recorded an interview. We haven't released it yet. And she's one of the smartest people I know about how change works at the CEO level. So when she speaks, I listen. And she said, talk to Mark Smith.
I think people tend to look at this as almost like a cookie cutter. Change is done in a very particular way. You have methods, you have tools, they apply them in a very methodical and thought through way. And I saw very early on in my career that if you follow the exact diktat of a method or a tool, it costs you more, it takes you longer, it frustrates people.
Mark is a VP at Publicis Sapient, and that's a well-known digital consulting firm. But Mark's taken on many different roles in his 23 years in the change management world. I mean, he knows both what it means to help others with change, but also to lead change himself. He has played all the roles on both sides of the table. So here's our conversation about knowing when to stick and knowing when to twist. 23 years. I mean, I've been in this game about the same time, one way or the other. There's this tension that exists when you find something that works. One is you're like, it's a miracle. It worked last time. And we just have, assorted wirings that just make us want to go back and repeat the same old thing because it's comfortable and it's familiar and there's a track record. And I'm curious to know how you figure out the balance between what's familiar and what's new, but also how you help you and those around you stay curious, stay open, stay flexible to find the new stuff and not kind of ossify in the old ways or the standard ways of doing it.
That's a great question. I mean, I tend to think of like, as you go through your career, you get more and more experience. You pick up a set of ingredients, or somebody described to me, it's like you have this toolbox. And you just keep adding tools to it, and you've got something to use for everything. And you basically use the tools based on the situation you're in. Okay, it's a great analogy. But the thing that struck me, and I'll actually give you a great example. I was working on, it's the world's largest building society. We're doing a nice piece of, change the way they drive change using agile ways of working and modern tooling and creating capability and so on. We had that running. We were doing some work in treasury. We had all these disparate programs. And it was starting to not fall apart, but it was getting really hard. And ultimately what you would do is you add more governance and you add more layers and you add more communication channels. And, this is how we would typically manage, all these complexities.
Right.
And I did completely the opposite. I was reading a book about how you move the decisions close to the people that do the work.
Right.
I was thinking, hey, you know what? These are all discrete programs of work. And I spoke to Macaulay, this guy that is working with Derek. And we basically, I'll tell you what, we're going to set a set of guardrails on each of these different programs. And we're going to give them the opportunity to play within these guardrails. Could do whatever they like. They've got certain guides, like it could be revenue, margin, value drivers, whatever the case may be. Each one of them got that. Our leadership team ended up being 3 people overseeing the whole program. And of significant size, north of 280 people. And it worked. And the thing that struck me as interesting is it was counter to the way I would have done it in the past completely.
Right.
But it was an experiment. And the idea is of doing that is kind of went, okay, this worked in this situation, why? And I spoke about it with a lot of people, and they actually feel that probably the most interesting comment that came out of it, each of the individual leads that I had in each of these different large programs are going, I felt empowered.
Right.
To make decisions and take ownership. And I only need to come to you when I need help.
Yeah.
And it became a new ingredient.
Mark, empowerment's all very well. Nobody takes a stand against empowerment, or at least not that I've ever encountered. But when it comes to it, empowerment is giving up some control and power,
yes,
and passing that on to other people. So often where empowerment falls down is like, look, I'm all for you being empowered. I just don't want to give up any power, control, certainty, authority, status myself. So how did you manage with your leadership team of 3 to hold that space of less control and more ambiguity?
I think this came down to, for each individual we spoke to, is going, I tell you what, I'm going to transfer this movement of power, if you like, to you. But in response, I want these 5 things.
Right.
And they're within these set of guardrails. You're going, as long as you do your part, I'll do my part. And it became an element of visibility. It's going, hey, if you're going to make some certain decisions, tell me the intent. You don't have to come ask for a decision. Tell me your intent. And then I'll ask you a couple of questions and so on. And through that kind of constant communication, and look, this wasn't overnight. We talked about 3-6 months to try and get this right. We got to a point where an individual would come to me and go, hey, Mark, I got this idea. I want to do X and Y. I go, hey, great idea. This is how I can support you. Whereas sometimes I go flat no. Look, it's not the right idea. Here's the 10 reasons why. Let's unpack it a little bit.
Yeah.
And they would listen because we built an element of trust over time.
Got it.
They worked within their guardrails. They involved me at the right time. I gave them decision-making authority, but I'm still in control.
If you'd like to follow up with Mark, you'll find him on LinkedIn. That's the best way. He's the Mark Smith at Publicis Sapient. Okay, here's that joke I promised. A CEO, a consultant, and a counselor walk into a bar. The CEO announces, "This bar needs a complete digital transformation." The consultant nods. She's not stupid. And she says, look, I'll create a roadmap for that. It'll take 18 months and probably cost twice your annual revenue. The counselor turns to the bartender and says, look, how are you coping with all this change? And the bartender looks up and says, look, you three have been coming here every week for 2 years talking about transformation, and you still order the same drinks and you still sit in the same seats. That's pretty good, eh? I mean, thank you, Claude AI, for helping me figure out a joke. And thank you, dear listener, for being a champion of Change Signal. If you've got a favorite episode, perhaps you might share it on LinkedIn so others can find it too. Thanks for doing the work. I'm glad you're here.